I guess also one of the nice things about the Blockchaingers ecosystem is that it is really easy to connect with different communities and ecosystems. And I think one of the examples of that is our next speaker. We were already working through IBM with Hyperledger. We were also working with BigChainDB. And I met Marta at one of the BigChainDB meetups in Berlin. And now she's talking here. While mentioning that, we're also connecting to a lot of other ecosystems abroad. We've just closed a partnership with Crypto Valley in Zug. So any people working on responsible token design or ICOs, we can connect that knowledge now as well. And I'm also proud to say that we have a partnership with the largest women in tech community of Great Britain, Develop Her. And I think what is really important that if any of you would be able to connect communities from different types, whether it's in a domain topic like energy or healthcare, or a specific group like women in tech or whatever it can be, an Ethereum meetup or a Rust developers meetup, feel welcome to connect them with the Blockchaingers, invite them, you know, all the events, they are free. And of course, in the end, it may end up being an awesome team at the hackathon in April. Without further ado, I would like to move into the enterprise world and hand over the floor to Marta Piekarska from Hyperledger. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm hand of applause.
Thank you. And yes, my name is slightly easier than the previous one, though I am Polish as well. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what Hyperledger is. I decided to focus more on the use cases because Hyperledger is a huge ecosystem, and I will let you ask questions about specific frameworks that we develop during the Q&A, because I want to spark your imagination of what you can do with Hyperledger frameworks. And I am trying to be very Bitcoiny with my dress, so it is the Genesis block of Bitcoin that is on my dress printed here. I'm very proud of that dress. Let's start. Quickly, I'll explain my role. Director of Ecosystem means that I am responsible for facilitating the relationship between the members of Hyperledger and connecting everyone within our ecosystem. Who are members? That's everyone who participate in Hyperledger. It's the sponsoring members, so enterprises. It's the open source community. Anyone who ever participates in developing code, in working groups, in our meetups. So anyone. We are not pay to play. You don't have to contribute any amount of money to be part of Hyperledger. It's enough that you participate in any way in Hyperledger. I do know how to code. I have a PhD in computer science, so you can talk code with me as well. So I have a question for you. How many of you have tried developing with blockchain? How many of you have a startup here? Okay, great. So we know what we're talking about. Did you already choose a quest for your future startup here? Anyone? Okay, so you're still exploring. I really wanted to put a meme on a quest and looked up memes on Quest, and I didn't know which one to choose because they were really good. So that's why I put 5 of them. I really wanted to start with something that I recognized. People like struggles. I was 2 days ago in Estonia. I was talking to someone who now lives in Estonia, but he also lived in Singapore before. And he told me, you know why I moved out of Singapore? Because life in Singapore is really nice. And I really wanted to start solving real problems in the real world. And I think like how Bitcoin, in blockchain world, we feel like we now have this amazing technology that will solve all of the problems, and all of the world's biggest challenges will now be solved. No, they won't. I don't think I know all the answers. I don't think I know any of the answers, but I think I know this one answer. Blockchain will not solve all of your problems, and none of the quests that are presented by the quest providers will be solved with blockchain. Blockchain can be only part of your solution, and people here today that want to participate in this amazing, amazing project have to think bigger. You have to start with the solution that is much bigger, and blockchain will only enhance that solution. The problems are much bigger than that. I'm not sure if the clicker works. No, it won't. Okay, so I can put that away. So what is Linux Foundation? Linux Foundation was created to solve the struggles and so recognize that struggles are things that are out there in the world. We were set up 16 years ago to promote open source in every major industry, and to bring partners together to help them understand how to promote, to build frameworks in open source and give the backbone in marketing, PR, and legal infrastructure. And we are much more than core Linux. We have projects in Node.js, in automotive-grade Linux, in Kubernetes, if you've ever worked with cloud. Let's Encrypt, probably you've used Let's Encrypt. I see nods, that's good. So these are big projects. There are some minor ones. There are over 50, so I could spend the rest of the evening naming them. And about 2 years ago, Jim Zemlin, our executive director, has been approached by about 30 companies. You might have heard some of the names, like IBM, like Hitachi, like Fujitsu. Digital Assets, DTCC, were among the major ones out there. They came to Jim Zemlin and said, "Hey, have you heard about this thing called Bitcoin?" And Jim said, "Yes, I do read the news, as you can imagine." And they said, "Well, what do you think about it?" And Jim said, "Well, you know what? Bitcoin does not really fit the model of this advancing business and enterprises with open source. This is not really what fits that model. But the underlying technology called blockchain, this is something which we can really try looking at. So let's try looking at how we can fit into it." And this is how Hyperledger started.
Welcome to the Hyperledger Greenhouse, an incubator for open source blockchain technologies for business, hosted by the Linux Foundation. So what does that mean exactly? Let's start here with you. You're a business, large or small, participating in a commercial ecosystem. Your business partners and peers want to do business with you, but in order to do that, you'll need a ledger. This ledger contains a record of your transactions, along with many, if not all, of the other transactions in the network. It is vitally important to know that your copy of the ledger is identical to everyone else's. So you'll need a distributed ledger. It's a new kind of network database that lets everyone in an ecosystem keep a copy of a common system of record. But how does everyone agree on which transactions succeed or fail? That's where Hyperledger software comes in. This plant is actually software that each business runs on systems it controls to broadcast out its transactions with other parties and receive, validate, and interact with messages delivered by others. With any network like this, a particular software standard is used to keep everyone in sync. But there are other ways to build these kinds of networks, using different consensus algorithms and different smart contract languages. There will be many different ledger networks out there. Ideally, they would all be able to interoperate due to certain common properties, much like how the Linux community uses various operating systems with a common kernel. At Hyperledger, we're growing many different kinds of ledger technologies. Here, you'll find communities of software developers working together to propel open source blockchain frameworks and tools into the future to deployment and adoption. Businesses with strict blockchain requirements trust Hyperledger because it's hosted by the Linux Foundation, and its projects are developed by an open source community. Developers can collaborate on a global level across company and industry lines to create innovative, modular open source components and platforms. It's this open source approach that allows for the kind of transparency, longevity, collaboration, community, and of course, security that blockchain needs to become more mainstream, which is what Hyperledger is all about. Hyperledger projects are meant to help you focus on developing your business solutions and feel confident that the legal, technical, and organizational infrastructure is in place, thanks to Hyperledger and the Linux Foundation. These are all open source projects and anyone is welcome to pick them up and use them, no fee or permission required. Of course, this only represents a fraction of what open source blockchain technologies can do, now and in the future. So it's time to ask yourself, who will you trust with your trust network?
So if there's one thing that you really want to remember from this presentation is that we are a collaborative, global and open source software community that is hosted by Linux Foundation. And we advance blockchain technologies for business. So we focus on enterprise-grade blockchains. We don't do public permissionless blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And we are hosted by Linux Foundation. We do have big enterprises like IBM, like Accenture, like Cisco, like Oracle, that are members of Hyperledger that help us develop and that are the core contributors. We are not a development house, so Hyperledger does not provide you with developers. We bring those partners together and help them developing within Hyperledger. Now, how do people use Hyperledger frameworks? The first and biggest project that has came out from that was based on Hyperledger Fabric, which is a framework that is written in Go and is built as a kind of plug-and-play mechanism where all the parts can be brought together. It has a very interesting ordering system and a very really interesting properties, mostly used in financial technologies, although Fabric is also used for supply chain, for insurance applications. It's very mature. It was one of the 2 funding frameworks in Hyperledger. So it has graduated to 1.0 in June. And probably Hyperledger collaboration is best known for Fabric. So quite often I'm asked, or people come to me and say, we develop with Hyperledger, meaning we develop with Hyperledger Fabric, not even being aware of the fact that there are more frameworks than Hyperledger Fabric. So one of the big projects that have been developed by Swift, ANZ, Wells Fargo, BNY Mellon, and BNP Paribas was cross-border payments use case, where these enterprises showed that there is a possibility of creating an interbank payment platform to reconcile in real time. Another one, I don't have a slide on that, is a project called Yubin, coming out from Singapore, where banks in Singapore created another reconciliation project on Hyperledger. They actually did an interesting thing where they compared Fabric, Corda, and Quorum, implementing exactly the same project in the three frameworks, and decided to go with Fabric as their go-to implementation. So now I have another video that explains exactly what Fabric is. This one comes from, actually was produced by IBM.
Hyperledger is one of the fastest growing open source blockchain communities. Anyone can help lead it, and dozens of companies are working together building a blockchain fabric that can support production business networks. The work started last year with a simple framework to test the interaction between applications and secure blockchain networks. And it's allowed us to test use cases in supply chain, capital markets, manufacturing, and healthcare. Here's what we learned. First, we learned that permissioned blockchain networks that require every peer to execute every transaction, maintain a ledger, and run consensus can't scale very well. And they can't support true private transactions and confidential contracts. So the Hyperledger community designed Fabric V1 to deliver a truly modular, scalable, and secure foundation for industrial blockchain solutions. The most notable change is that peers are now decoupled into two separate runtimes with three distinct roles: endorser, committer, and consenter. Here's how it works. Say you run an organic market in California, and I grow radishes on my farm in Chile. You and I are on a blockchain network that supports transactions between various markets, growers, shippers, banks, and others. Say I agree to sell you my radishes at a special low price, but I need the other markets that buy from me to continue buying at the standard price. They shouldn't be able to execute our confidential agreement and find out the details of our deal. In fact, if they aren't part of the deal, the transaction shouldn't appear on their ledger. Fabric V1 handles all this. My app looks up your identity from a membership service and then sends the transactions only to our peers. Both of our peers will generate a result. In this two-party agreement, the transaction requires both of us to render the same result. But in transactions with more parties, other rules can apply. Then the peers send the validated transaction back to the application, which sends it to a consensus cloud for ordering. And then the ordered transactions are sent back to the peers and committed to the ledger. But to get my radishes to your market, there are many other parties involved. Some need to know that my radishes have been verified and checked into a shipping container. Others need to handle bills of lading, customs inspections, financing, insurance, but most of these parties don't need to know about our special price. Now think about our transaction running on a network handling all the markets, all the farms, shippers, facilitators, the whole supply chain. This is the same pattern needed by many industries. Anywhere we need to manage confidential obligations to each other without passing everything through a central authority. V1 delivers one network with everyone working together while ensuring confidentiality, scalability, and security. And that's what we're building right now. And we could use your help. So, how do we get there? Go to hyperledger.org to find out.
Fabric does support smart contracts. It uses its own smart contracts called chain code. Another use case for Composer, which is a tool that Simon will be talking about, is healthcare records. That's a project that came from Change Healthcare, GEM, Hashed Healthcare, Kaiser, and Patientary Labs. How to share healthcare records across borders and within states. Interstate medical licensing, a huge problem. This is Hash Health and Blockchain in Illinois State Initiative. If you're by any chance in Chicago next week, I'm going to be giving a talk there, or actually a whole day workshop on blockchain. On Tuesday, I believe, and we'll be talking more about medical stuff there. So this is an additional thing that we're doing with blockchain. And then there is ethical seafood movement and supply chain in general. That is a huge problem. This is done with Hyperledger's Sawtooth. There was another funding or starting framework from Hyperledger. It was donated to us by Intel. Now it has about 20 different contributing companies and enterprises. Sawtooth started as a project without any, or framework without any smart contract mechanism. Now it has been married with another framework called Borrow, that was Ethereum Virtual Machine Solidity Smart Contracts, and it has been named Seth. And Sawtooth uses proof of elapsed time as a consensus mechanism, which is a very interesting consensus mechanism. I'm happy to talk about it during the Q&A. So ethical Seafood movement, I have a video, but I know we are running out of time, so won't show you that. I can show you that later. Basically, you can track down the fish from the net all the way to your table with smart contracts, with IoT devices, making sure that all of that is removing the trust and removing any kind of bribery, and incentivizes the fishermen to report his employer if the employer is trying to report ethically caught fish as sustainable fish. So I'll skip the video. Diamond supply chain, a very famous use case. And then verifiable IDs for refugees. I will show that video because this is something that gets me out of bed every day. So it's very important to me.
According to Article 6 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. However, 1.2 billion people in the world live without documented proof of their existence. That means they're excluded from modern society and the everyday activities that we take for granted. ID 2020 believes that the future can be different. This public-private partnership is dedicated to solving the challenges related to identity in today's world. To do this, we need to understand what truly defines our identity and how we prove it. We need to appreciate the human at the heart of the challenge. Using innovative technology, we can discover how that identity can be established, trusted, and strengthened over time.
I am Sarah. I am a mother.
I am a doctor. I am a soccer fan.
I am Fabiola. I am a student.
I am a princess.
I am Zhao. I am a scientist.
I am a teacher. I am...
Can you show me some identification?
No, my house was completely destroyed. I just ran.
You will need some ID to cross the border.
I've got nothing on me. What can I do? I'm a father. I'm trying to find my family. Please, I'm scared.
Hi, how can I help you?
My child needs to be vaccinated.
Okay, can I get your name?
I am Nia.
And your date of birth?
I don't know my date of birth. I don't have a birth certificate.
Don't you have any form of ID? I'm sorry, Nia, we need something that proves who you are and where you were born.
Can you please help me? I'm here on holidays, but I've lost my passport and my flight leaves tomorrow.
That will take some time to process.
But I need to get back. Family emergency. What can I do?
Can I get your name?
Can you show me some identification?
Don't you have any form of ID?
Please help me.
What if your identity was always in your hands? An identity you can trust, that others can trust? What if this digital identity was always at your fingertips, and people could verify your identity in a few simple steps? What if you were in control of your data and how it's shared with others? What if this personal, portable identity helped you to learn, work, and live? What if showing who you are was as easy as saying, I am?
I am Yusuf.
Across the globe, the pieces are coming together to make this happen. Accenture, Microsoft, and Avanade have teamed up to create the prototype you've seen in action. It's a first step towards a digital identity solution for all. To achieve this, we need motivated, passionate people and organizations to join us. So we invite you to come together, collaborate.
Okay, Okay, I'll skip that part because that's marketing. Just wanted to show you the important part, which is ID 2020 is a United Nations program of giving 1.3 billion people in the world identity. They are not decided if they want to do it with a blockchain or not. We are, as a Hyperledger, part of that movement. We are trying to do it with, and we have a project Indie, which is solving identity with a blockchain with Evernym and Sovereign Foundation. Another thing, giving musical rights to the artists with Sawtooth. And that's just the beginning, right? That's just a teaser of what people are doing with our frameworks. If you want to know who is a member, that's a quick skip. We are growing very fast, that's obvious. There are the projects that we are doing. If you want to ask me about any of the frameworks, just take a quick look of what we are having, and Q&A afterwards. I'll answer those questions. And now I'm probably going to be thrown off the stage because I'm way over time. So yes, these are the frameworks that we have. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.